All right, welcome to the Wolverine TV. I'm Clayton Sayfie with EJ Holland. We are from thewolverine.com. We're going to get into all the recruiting storylines of the week for Michigan football recruiting. Before we do so, remember to put in that promo code BLUE60 over at thewolverine.com. You get 60 days of our premium content for free. So make sure to do that right now. A ton of premium content on there, a ton of premium scoops, including EJ dropping some bombs this morning. We're recording this Thursday night. It'll come out Friday, but a busy week, a busy day on Thursday, EJ, in the recruiting world for Michigan. You were in Texas earlier in the week. You came back. You're headed back to the great state of Michigan to check out some high school football this weekend. So a lot going on. How are you doing with all the news here? Because we had a couple really slow weeks before that, and now we got a bunch of big headlines.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people don't know, like I stayed in Texas until Wednesday, just because we have family there and my wife wanted to spend time with her parents. And so we stayed there until Wednesday and I actually booked the flights for Tuesday. So Wednesday morning I woke up and we're like, oh, we don't have flights. And so we ended up getting last minute flights and getting back to Chicago late at night. And then, knowing I had to drive like 5.5 hours to Bay City on Friday, I slept in today. And when I woke up this morning, I woke up, it wasn't even morning, it was like noon Central Time. When I woke up at noon Central Time, I legit had 72 text messages. So, a lot of that had to do with Branden Jennings. And then it just kind of kept, it was kind of a rolling effect from there. So, yeah, Branden Jennings set a commitment date. We'll talk about him. I, dropped a big note on Omarion Cooper, a Florida State defensive back commit. Michigan picked up a grad transfer commit. So it's been a super, super busy Thursday.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. You mentioned Branden Jennings, the Rivals 100 running or linebacker, excuse me, out of Jacksonville, the number 52 player in the country. A couple questions for you on this, but first of all, I guess how did this all come about? Where now he's starting to trend towards Michigan, a former Florida State commit.
Yeah, I first brought up Branden Jennings on Monday or Tuesday in my blue chips, and he was just kind of a side note. He was just like, hey, this is a guy to keep an eye on. He just decommitted from Florida State. He's visited Michigan in the past. Miami's probably the most logical landing spot, but a guy worth keeping an eye on. And then it just progressed so quickly after that. The reason I said so he decommitted from Florida State, where his father actually won a national championship. So he's a legacy recruit. And then the reason I said Miami is the going to be the logical choice was because he's been to a handful of Miami games this season. He has a brother on the team at Miami, and it's closer to home. I mean, Jacksonville's at in North Florida, Miami's all the way down south, but still, it's closer than Ann Arbor, obviously. So it just made a lot of sense that he was just going to end up at Miami. Michigan did a tremendous job here. Like I said, he's already visited. He was in town for the game against Army last fall. I think he wanted to carve his own path, didn't really want to join his brother at Miami. Brian Jean Mary, Michigan's new linebackers coach, has strong Florida ties. And I think it all just kind of was the perfect storm for Michigan with his personality, with him wanting to kind of get away from home, with the familiarity with the program, and with Florida State in a bit of a dumpster fire. It just worked out where Michigan was able to, come in and get him almost immediately. I even texted a source today and I was like, how did this even happen? And he was just like, it happened fast. It's true. It just kind of happened out of the, not necessarily out of the blue because we mentioned him, but, it definitely wasn't expected. And if Michigan does close with Jennings, then which is fully expected at this point, I'm kind of talking like he's already committed. But if he does, pick Michigan, then I mean that's a hell of a land for the staff. He's a top 100 prospect, and he's a massive grade of upgrade over Casey Finney.
Yeah, so Michigan, you mentioned his dad was a national champion at Florida State. Michigan's had some success with those guys. Devin Bush Sr. was a national champion at Florida State. Michigan, of course, landing Devin Bush, an All-American, consensus All-American, who played at Michigan from 2016 to 2018. So some good success with those guys. I want to ask you about this possible and looks like likely commitment through the lens of new linebackers coach Brian Jean-Marie, if that's how you want to say it, I guess. I accentuated it there. But we've talked about this before. When he settles in, he's going to be a really good recruiter on this staff. It looks like he's getting more and more settled in, and you see this type of land here if he's able to pull this off, again, barring something unexpected.
Yeah, we talked about him earlier this week when we released that video on which coaches were standing out on the recruiting trail. And I mentioned that. I was like, once Brian Jean-Mary settles in, he's going to be, definitely one of the lead dogs on this staff. And obviously that's, coming into fruition. And even now, this cycle, which isn't even his true full first cycle. I mean, the guy just moved to Ann Arbor a couple of months ago. So he played a key role in helping close with Junior Colson. He's also of Haitian descent, just like Colson was. And I know they really bonded towards the end of Junior's recruiting process. And he played a role in landing Jaden Hood. And obviously he played a huge role here in potentially landing Branden Jennings. So overall, I think Brian Jean-Mary is going to continue to prove his worth on the recruiting trail. This would be a monster land and continuing kind of momentum in Florida. I mean, those are some really impressive recruits, both Jaden Hood. I know Jaden Hood's only a 3-star. He should be a 4-star. But Jaden Hood, an Under Armour All-American, Branden Jennings, a top 100 prospect, and then Jaden McBurroughs, an upside corner. I mean, those are 3 really, really good lands in the state of Florida. If Michigan's able to close out with Jennings. So I expect Michigan to continue to hit Florida hard moving forward, especially with Jean-Mary. They've always done it, but especially with Jean-Mary on staff, it gives them even more of a boost.
Yeah, and of course, as we've talked about, Jennings was a Florida State commit, and you said Florida State's a dumpster fire. I tweeted that a couple weeks ago during one of their games where they were getting killed. I was live look at Florida State, and it was just that dumpster fire gif. So Florida State is a dumpster fire right now on the field. Who are some other flip candidates? Because you talked at the top of the show and mentioned his name quickly, Omarion Cooper, a 3-star corner out of Lehigh Acres, Florida. He is a Florida State commit currently. Of course, Jennings decommitted from Florida State, but he would be a guy that would be a flip candidate. And then any other names out there? Because I think you wrote it tonight on thewolverine.com that tis the season for starting to flip guys because the early signing period is coming, and you might be committed somewhere, but if you really aren't that solid, you might start looking around at this time of the year.
Right. And so Omarion Cooper is definitely one to watch. It's funny, I've seen both Jennings and Cooper in person randomly, before they were even Michigan targets. Back when I lived in Dallas, I saw Jennings at a 7-on-7 tournament, and I saw Cooper at Deion Sanders' big camp that he does in Dallas every summer. But yeah, I mean, Cooper is a big, long corner. He is very physical. He's really well built. As much as I like a guy like Max Hairston, who's committed to Kentucky, I think Cooper has a better build. He's not very quick on his feet. He doesn't necessarily have the best hips, but he does actually have good technique. He has worked out in Deion Sanders' youth program for a long time. He even played 7-on-7 with Deion Sanders' team before COVID kind of impacted, all the offseason camps and everything. So he's gotten training from, an NFL Hall of Famer in Deion. So I feel like that's helped his game. And so overall, I think Omarion would be a big land, and especially when you look at Michigan's corner board. I mean, the Michigan corner board is literally nothing. Like Sierra Wright's trending to USC, Kamari Lassiter is not coming. I mean, really, they're all in on Omarion Cooper. And right after, the Jennings news kind of, got out there and he started trending to Michigan, that's when, I was talking to a source about Jennings, and then Omarion Cooper's name just popped up. I didn't even ask about Omarion Cooper. And it was just like, yeah, I mean, from what I was able to gather, I just started to feel really, really good about Michigan's chances. And so if Omarion Cooper decides to back away from Florida State, there's no doubt in my mind that Michigan would be the landing spot. So that's definitely, he's still committed to Florida State as we're recording right now. And, Florida State's going to try their best to keep him. But right now, I feel really good about the Wolverines being able to steal him, especially if they land Jennings. They're both close and they talk often. And then on top of that, I think Jennings' commitment doesn't necessarily impact Michigan's pursuit of Maurice Freeman, an Indiana commit, who Michigan just offered. When Michigan first offered Freeman, they offered him as a general linebacker. Now they're recruiting him more as a Viper / jumbo safety. I mean, I don't see him as a traditional safety at all. I mean, he's not a guy that is feeling that safety need. He's more of just an athlete that they really like. And again, Jennings' commitment won't deter them from continuing to pursue Freeman. He's only a 2-star prospect. Again, he's an Indiana commit, so he's not a big name committed to a big program. But the staff loves his versatility and his athleticism, and he's definitely one to watch. I think he's a flippable guy for sure. If for whatever reason Omarion Cooper stays with Florida State, which I think is more unlikely than likely now after what kind of transpired today. But if he does stay with Florida State, if the Seminoles are able to keep him close to home, then Max Harrison, who I brought up from West Bloomfield, who's committed to Kentucky, would be an ideal candidate to fill that corner slot late. But those are some of the kind of happenings around potential flip guys. And then really quickly, Michigan has not stopped working on Notre Dame wide receiver commit Lorenzo Styles. I'm not saying there's a ton there right now, but keep that in the back of your head.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's funny because Michigan hasn't had a commit in a while. I mean, I think the last guy, if I'm recalling correctly, was 2022 tight end commit Marlon Klein. I could be missing someone. And then now there seems to be a flurry here of, things starting to trend Michigan's way in a couple of recruitments. And then one of the last bits of news this week, which was the biggest news at the beginning of the week, but here we are at the end. And it's not as big. It's still going to be massive, and especially next week as we near this commitment ceremony. But October 25th is going to be the day that Raeshawn Benny commits to a school. He released his top 4 as he told us he would last week when we saw him. Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, and Kentucky all in the mix for him, and all have a legitimate shot at landing him. Michigan's felt good about him for a while and is, kind of looked at as the leader from everybody really around the country and, everybody locally as well. But Michigan State gaining a little steam. There's some smoke on their momentum brewing a little bit. So, we're about 10 days away from Raeshawn Benny committing, which could start off Michigan versus Michigan State week with a bang, one way or the other, or he could go to Penn State or Kentucky, like I mentioned. But your thoughts, Raeshawn Benny? Finally committing, even though we thought it was going to be even longer, possibly December or even February, closer to those 2 signing periods.
Yeah, I brought up the fact that I thought the dead period would help Michigan with Raeshawn Benny because he would make a decision sooner. And so I'm not surprised that he's making the decision sooner than expected because his whole thing was, I want to make visits. Obviously, he can't make visits. He did think about taking it all the way to February, but I think Raeshawn is kind of tired of the process, so he wants to get it over with. This one's just kind of tough to read. I think Benny kind of pretty much knows where he's going, but he has not informed the staffs yet, hence why you haven't seen any new picks or anything like that. There's no real leak of information because Benny hasn't, told anybody. Obviously, Michigan State's kind of beating their drum very loudly, and I do think there's smoke there. Don't get me wrong. Like I do buy some of it. I wrote that. I think that Michigan State's been kind of the aggressor here in the last week. They've been recruiting him extremely hard. Mel Tucker has consistently been on the line with Benny. He has a teammate committed to Michigan State. They're selling him on being the face of the class and the new beginning in East Lansing and all that stuff that they've kind of been pitching to no avail this cycle. But it could work with Benny. He's an in-state kid. I mean, Benny's always been more quiet, been low-key, been to himself. So it wouldn't surprise me if Benny kind of spurned Michigan and went to Michigan State and made kind of the alternative decision. And that's why I'm not ruling out his other options. I mean, Penn State has some momentum in the Detroit Metro, and the reason they were kind of out of the mix was because they were recruiting him as an offensive lineman as opposed to a defensive lineman. Now Penn State's kind of changed its tune, so that's a little bit of an interesting twist. Kentucky has a very strong connection with Oak Park head coach Greg Carter, dating back to years ago. And then last cycle, Kentucky came in and pulled one of his top players in Justin Rogers. So Kentucky, I think, is the true dark horse. But if Raeshawn really does make his decision based around relationships, Michigan's been there the longest. They've been the constant. He got to make it to campus before the start of the dead period. It's close to home. I mean, he knows the entire staff extremely well. The guys in the class have been recruiting him hard. So even though there's a lot of Michigan State smoke right now, I have no reason to change my pick from Michigan. Like I said, I'm buying some of it, but I am not like panicked at this time. I would be a little concerned if I were Michigan, but I'm not, to the point where I'm like, scrambling or trying to make adjustments or something.
Yeah, and to be completely honest, when I went and saw him at his game last week, I asked him about each of those 4 top schools. I kind of guessed his top 4 before he released it. And, I asked him how often he's talking to Michigan. I asked him, quite a few questions about Michigan. He said every other day he likes those guys. He went in depth about why he likes his relationships with Sean Nua, Jim Harbaugh, the head coach, Sharon Moore, the tight ends coach, who's also the area recruiter. But then I asked him about Michigan State. He said he talks to him every day. He talks to that whole staff. He said, I was on a call with the entire Michigan State staff just the other day. So he's certainly interested in Michigan State. He's certainly interested in all those schools at the top. So it's going to be interesting to see. We'll talk about him again next week as that decision gets a little bit closer and maybe possibly, things get a little bit clearer in terms of who he's going to pick. But all 4 viable options there as his finalists. And then the last thing, Michigan, just before we start recording. So good thing that we chose to do this late night. But Willie Allen, a Louisiana Tech offensive line grad transfer, started out at LSU, went the JUCO route, and then to Louisiana Tech. He is committed to Michigan now, and he will join the team in January. A huge commitment for Michigan. He's a big kid. Tell us a little bit about him, because I know you gathered some info on him here tonight.
Yeah, it was funny because I texted the group and I was like, Michigan just got a grad transfer offensive line. Who handles this? Because, this is the first grad transfer that Michigan's had since me joining the Michigan beat. So it was a little unclear. I guess I'll handle grad transfers moving forward. But as soon as he gave a commitment, obviously we were trying to work that out on the staff end, but on the source end, I texted a program source and was like, hey, is Willie Allen, what's the deal with him? And they're like, oh, Willie Allen is going to be a monster. We absolutely love him. We're so fired up about him. We think he can be an NFL draft pick. And so, they're very high on Willie Allen. Like you said, he is huge. He's 6'6", 340 pounds. So potential tackle or even guard, just depending on, how they view him once he gets to campus. With grad transfers, I know a lot of people are asking, is he going to play now? Like, is he going to suit up on next Saturday or something? Like, no, he's scheduled to arrive in January. He actually opted out of this season for Louisiana Tech and entered the transfer portal. So he will have 1 year of eligibility beginning next season. So he'll be on campus in January. I mentioned a while back, I didn't foresee this one. It kind of came out of left field, but I mentioned a while back that Michigan was looking for around 26 this recruiting cycle, including a potential transfer or 2. And so Willie Allen, behind the scenes, Michigan kind of made him a top priority. I was also told that they see him as the best guy on the transfer market. Right now, I was told that Michigan doesn't have any other transfers on the board currently. Of course, that can always change with guys going in the portal. I mean, Allen just entered the portal like 3 days ago, so this happened like super fast. So I was originally told it could be a transfer or two, so I wouldn't rule out another, potential grad transfer or straight transfer joining the program. But I know Michigan's really fired up about Willie Allen, and he is a guy that they think will be the starter along their offensive line next season.
So this happened fast. The Branden Jennings news happened fast. A lot of things happening here this week. Again, after we had a couple slow weeks before that, so some really good stuff. Everybody is now caught up on the latest with Michigan football recruiting. EJ, hit us with the promo code that everybody can check out over at thewolverine.com.
Yeah, so just join us over at thewolverine.com. You can get all the scoop for us, all the inside information. Michigan could be on the verge of some really good news today as you're watching this and moving forward. So come give us a try and get all the information first over at thewolverine.com using promo code BLUE60, and you get 60 days for free.
There you have it. 60 days for free. Promo code BLUE60. We'll catch everybody next time here on the Wolverine TV.